The scanner beeped once, twice, and then everything stopped. It wasn't the machine that froze, it was the moment. Rashid Karim's hands trembled slightly as he stood behind the checkout counter, a line of impatient customers building behind him. In front of him sat an elderly woman on the floor of the grocery aisle, her frail body slumped, her breathing shallow, her groceries scattered like forgotten pieces of a life that had already been too heavy to carry. And in that instant, Rashid made a choice that would cost him everything. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because stories like this remind us what truly matters. Rashid had been balancing survival and sacrifice for years. Every morning, he woke before sunrise in his small apartment in Karachi, preparing breakfast for his 6-year-old daughter, Aina. She was his entire world, his reason for pushing through exhaustion, his light in a life that often felt unbearably heavy. Her mother had passed away years ago, leaving Rashid to learn both tenderness and strength all at once. He wasn't perfect, but he tried, every single day. Working as a cashier in a modest supermarket didn't offer much, but it was steady. It paid the rent, bought groceries, and occasionally allowed him to surprise Aina with a chocolate bar or a small toy. Those little moments meant everything. That afternoon, the store was crowded. Shelves were fully stocked, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the quiet rhythm of scanning items filled the air. Rashid moved efficiently, greeting customers with a tired but genuine smile. Then he heard the thud. It was soft, but unmistakable. He looked up to see an elderly woman collapse in the middle of the aisle. Her gray hair framed a pale face, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. A few customers paused, glanced, and then looked away, unsure or unwilling to get involved. Rashid didn't hesitate. He stepped out from behind his register, ignoring the rising complaints from customers in line. He rushed to her side, kneeling gently, placing one hand behind her back to support her. Her name, he later learned, was Safiya Begum. Her breathing was uneven, her lips dry. Her shopping basket held only a few essentials: bread, milk, and medicine. Rashid called for water, his voice urgent. He asked someone to bring a chair, but no one moved fast enough. So he helped her sit upright, steadying her as best he could. The store manager, Nadim, noticed. And his expression hardened immediately. Rules were rules. Rashid knew that. Employees were not allowed to leave their registers unattended, especially during peak hours. It didn't matter if someone needed help. It didn't matter if it was urgent. But in that moment, Rashid didn't see rules. He saw his own mother. He saw what it would feel like if she had collapsed somewhere, alone, with no one to care. So he stayed. He helped Safiya sip water slowly. He spoke softly, reassuring her. He checked her pulse awkwardly, unsure but determined. He asked another customer to call for medical help. And for a few minutes, everything else in the store faded. Until Nadim's voice cut through it all like a blade. Rashid was ordered back to his register immediately. Rashid didn't move. That single act of defiance sealed his fate. By the time the ambulance arrived and Safiya was safely taken away, Rashid had already been called into the office. The conversation was short. There was no room for explanation, no acknowledgement of what he had done. Just a cold statement that policies had been violated, customers had complained, and the store's reputation had been put at risk. Rashid was fired on the spot. He walked out of the store that afternoon under the harsh brightness of the midday sun, holding a small envelope containing his final pay. The same hands that had tried to save someone were now empty. When he reached home, Aina ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his legs, her laughter filling the room. For a moment, he smiled. But behind that smile was fear. How would he tell her? Days passed. Job applications were sent, calls were made, doors were knocked on, but nothing came through. Savings dwindled. Bills piled up. Rashid skipped meals so Aina wouldn't have to. At night, when she slept, he sat quietly by the window, staring out into the city lights, wondering if doing the right thing had been a mistake. But deep inside, he knew the answer. No. Kindness was never a mistake. Even when it hurt. A week later, something unexpected happened. Back at the supermarket, the usual routine continued. Nadim managed the floor with the same strict discipline. Employees worked quietly, avoiding mistakes, avoiding attention. Then the doors opened. A woman walked in, confident, composed, her presence commanding without effort. She wore simple but elegant clothing, her posture straight, her gaze sharp yet calm. This was Zara Safia. No one knew her at first. But they soon would. She moved slowly through the aisles, observing everything. The shelves, the staff, the customers. Her eyes lingered on details others would ignore. Then she approached the manager. There was something about her tone, firm, controlled, that immediately shifted the atmosphere. She asked about an incident. An elderly woman. A collapse. A cashier who had helped. Nadim hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything began to unravel. Because Zara wasn't just asking. She already knew. Safia Begum was her mother. A woman who had spent her life building something extraordinary, something vast and powerful. A business empire that stretched across industries. And Zara had inherited not just her wealth, but her strength. When her mother regained consciousness in the hospital, she spoke about the young man who had helped her. The one who didn't walk away. She remembered his kindness. His urgency. His humanity. And Zara made it her mission to find him. Back in the store, Nadim tried to justify his actions. Policies. Discipline. Customer satisfaction. But Zara wasn't interested in excuses. She asked one simple question. Where is he now? Nadim didn't have a good answer. Because Rashid Karim had disappeared into the vast crowd of people struggling to survive, unnoticed, unimportant to anyone except a small girl waiting for him at home. But Zara wasn't going to let it end there. The search began. And it didn't take long. Because kindness leaves a trail. A week later, Rashid was sitting outside a small tea stall, staring into a cup he couldn't afford to refill. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on him. That's when a car pulled up. He didn't pay much attention at first. Until someone called his name. He looked up. And his life changed. Zara stood before him, not as a distant figure of power, but as someone deeply, genuinely grateful. She thanked him. Not with grand gestures or overwhelming words, but with sincerity that felt real, undeniable. She told him about her mother. About that moment in the store. About how his kindness had meant everything. Rashid listened, confused, humbled, unsure of what to say. Because he hadn't done it for recognition. He had just done what felt right. And then came the offer. A position. Not just any job, but one that would change everything. A role in Zara's company, stable, well-paying, with benefits that could secure Aina's future. Rashid hesitated. Not because he didn't want it. But because he couldn't believe it. Life had knocked him down so hard that standing back up felt impossible. But this was something else. A second chance. And this time, he didn't let doubt win. He accepted. The days that followed were unlike anything he had experienced before. Training, new responsibilities, a structured environment where effort was recognized, where compassion wasn't punished. For the first time in years, Rashid felt seen. At home, Aina noticed the difference. There was more food on the table. More light in his eyes. More hope in the air. And slowly, the weight that had once defined their lives began to lift. But the real change wasn't just financial. It was something deeper. Rashid started believing again. Believing that goodness mattered. That doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, could still lead somewhere meaningful. Months later, Zara visited one of her company branches. Rashid was there. Working. Leading. Growing. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, no words were needed. Because they both understood something powerful. That one small act of kindness can ripple through lives in ways we never expect. Before we reach the end, if this story touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and comment. It helps stories like this reach more people who need to hear them. And here's a special request. Comment below with one act of kindness you've seen or experienced in your life, because your story might inspire someone else. Rashid's journey didn't end there. It continued, day by day, choice by choice. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. And in a world that often rewards speed over compassion, rules over humanity, his story stood as a quiet reminder. That sometimes, the most important thing you can do, is stop. And help. Because you never know who's watching. And you never know how one moment can change everything.